4 chairs on one side of my living room. My wife, her parents, and a lawyer I'd never met holding a 47-page document. The room smelled like Diane's lemon furniture polish. Diane wouldn't look at me. My mother-in-law slid a cashier's check across the coffee table. $2.8 million. "The twins aren't yours," she said. "Sign now and disappear." I read every page, all 47. Then I smiled, picked up the pen, and signed. If you're still with me, please subscribe and drop your location in the comments. It means everything. My name is Wyatt Kerrigan. I'm 46 years old, and 3 hours ago I signed away my parental rights, my marriage, and my home for $2.8 million. I'm in a motel room off Interstate 77, cash for a week. Laminate desk, polyester comforter, a fluorescent bathroom light that buzzed in a way that passed for company. 40 miles from anything Claiborne. The ice machine down the hall knocked every 40 seconds. Outside, trucks geared down for the exit ramp. Nobody in this building cared about my name or my net worth or what I'd signed tonight. The twins. I'd think about the twins later. Right now, I needed to understand how I got here. To understand what happened in my living room, you need the last 21 years. I married Diane Claiborne when I was 25. She was 23, working a position at her father's real estate firm that existed because she was his daughter. I was 6 years into a career as an insurance fraud investigator for a national carrier. Staged accident rings were my specialty. Coordinated crews that manufactured collisions, filed claims with rehearsed injuries, and funneled payouts through complicit chiropractors and body shops. My job was sitting across from people who'd rehearsed their stories and finding the places where those stories didn't match the paperwork. The Claibornes made their opinion of this marriage clear from the start. At the wedding, Patricia, Diane's mother, wore navy. Not mother of the bride festive. Navy, like a board meeting she couldn't cancel. She stood by the exit during the reception and spent the evening on her phone. Tall, silver-haired, straight-backed, she moved through the venue like she was appraising it for purchase. Howard, Diane's father, found me at the bar. Broad-shouldered man, gone soft. The kind who built something real once and spent the decades after letting his wife run it. "Welcome to the family, Wayne," he said, clapping my shoulder. "It's Wyatt." He was already scanning the room. Right, good man. Over the next 20 years, he'd cycle through Wayne, Warren, and once, at a Christmas dinner, Walt. I stopped correcting him after the reception. For the first few years, the house felt like ours. We bought a 4-bedroom colonial 20 minutes from the Claiborne properties. Hardwood floors, a stone fireplace, a backyard where I planned to teach kids to throw a football. My name on the mortgage. My payments every month for 21 years. Those first years, she asked about my cases at dinner. I'd tell her about the shell companies, the staged collisions, the way I could read a bank statement and know within 10 minutes whether someone was lying. "That's crazy," she said once, chin propped on her hand. "You're like a detective." "I am a detective, a real one, though. Like TV." I didn't correct her. She was leaning across the table, interested. That was enough. Diane liked that I could fix things. Our first winter, the breaker panel failed during a storm. I replaced the unit myself. When the dishwasher leaked and rotted the subflooring, I tore it out, dried the joists, laid new tile on a Saturday afternoon. When a crack opened in the fireplace mortar, I spent 2 weekends repointing every stone by hand, matching the batch to the original 1940s formula. She watched me work from the kitchen doorway, glass of wine resting against her hip. "You're good at this," she said. "It's mortar. You fill the gaps and let it set." Not just the mortar. Everything. You know how things fit together. That was the best compliment she gave me in our entire marriage. I didn't know that yet. I assumed there'd be more. At 35, I left fraud investigation. I'd spent the previous 6 years earning an engineering degree at night, classes after shift, textbooks on weekends. Because a decade of sitting across from liars had changed the way I processed everything around me. Every inconsistency in a friend's story triggered the same recognition patterns that flagged staged collisions. I needed structures instead of people. With the degree in hand, I started supervised practice under a licensed PE load-bearing walls, foundation integrity, the systems that keep everything standing. The math didn't lie. A beam either held or it didn't. I passed my PE exam 2 years later, earned reciprocity in 2 more states after that, and by 40 I was pulling $140,000 a year. I refinanced the Colonial twice to build equity. The house was worth 4 times what I'd paid for it. None of this registered with the Claibornes. Patricia hosted holiday dinners at the family estate, 7,000 square feet of Georgian revival on 12 acres with a circular gravel drive and a climate-controlled greenhouse for the orchids she grew for regional competition. I attended every dinner for 2 decades. Brought wine, helped Howard haul folding tables from the garage. Sat where I was told to sit. Thanksgiving, the year I earned my engineering license. Patricia introduced me to the wife of a Claiborne property contractor as someone who did something with buildings. I said structural assessment. She repeated something with buildings and moved on. I ate my turkey. 2 Christmases later, Patricia held a fundraiser at the estate. 40 guests from her charity boards. I was clearing dessert plates when she walked a donor past me. "This is Diane's husband," she said, not breaking stride. "He does labor-adjacent work." The donor extended his hand. "Construction?" "Engineering," I said. Patricia was already steering him toward Howard. "He tinkers," she called back. Diane stood 4 feet away. She'd heard every word. On the drive home, she put her hand on my knee. "She doesn't mean it the way it sounds," Diane said. "She means it the way it sounds. You've always been too sensitive about my mother. Your mother just told a stranger I'm a laborer. She said labor adjacent. That's different." I looked at her. She turned toward the window. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the drive. That was year 14. By 16, she'd stopped defending her mother. By 18, she drove to the Claiborne dinners alone. By 20, she stopped inviting me. I didn't fight it. I went to my office, 3rd bedroom, converted. I lined the walls with corkboard and pinned up hand-drawn topographical maps of every trail I'd ever walked. Blue Ridge, Shenandoah, the Appalachian Corridor through Virginia and West Virginia. I drew them from satellite imagery and USX survey data, using fine-tip pens I kept in shallow drawers, organized by nib width. 7% grade, 1,200 feet above sea level. Each contour line was a verifiable fact about the physical world. An elevation marker doesn't care who your family is. It doesn't renegotiate. It never once called me Wayne. When the house got too quiet, I drew maps of places I'd never visited. The most honest work I could do with my hands in a building that was beginning to feel like someone else's property. Here's what 21 years as furniture teaches you. The room. You learn it better than anyone who sits in the chairs. You see where the weight falls. You hear what gets said when nobody remembers you're listening. Nobody closes the door when the furniture's in it. I picked up more about the Claiborne family's operations from their dinner table conversations than any of them realized. Property deals, legal strategies, who owed favors to whom. I never used any of it. But I remembered all of it. Tricia Odom was the one person who knew what I was capable of. She'd been my investigation partner for 6 years at the Cashier, a compact, fast-talking woman with dark brown skin, close-cropped natural hair going silver at the edges, and tortoiseshell reading glasses she was always shoving up her nose. We'd traced shell companies together, pulled apart staged accident networks, and once spent 11 months building a case against a chiropractor, billing for patients who didn't exist. Tricia followed a money trail the way other people followed road signs, turn by turn, never losing the thread. I never had to explain a lead to her twice, and she'd gotten sharper since. After I left for engineering, she earned a paralegal certification and joined a family law firm downtown. Forensic consulting. High-asset divorces where one spouse had hidden money, forged documents, buried assets in corporate shells. Same skills we'd used catching scammers, aimed upward now. We met for lunch every few months. Same diner on Broad Street, same booth by the window. "How's the dynasty?" she asked once, stirring her coffee. She always called the Claibornes the dynasty. Patricia told a room full of people, "I do labor-adjacent work." Tricia set her spoon down. "You hold a PE license in how many states?" "3. 3 states. And you're labor-adjacent." She pushed her glasses up. "Wyatt, I watched you dismantle a $1 million fraud scheme with bank statements and a legal pad. These people have no idea who they're looking at." "They're not looking at me," I said. "That's the point. I'm furniture. And that's what worries me." I shrugged. "I'm fine. You always say that." She flagged the waitress for more coffee. "I've been doing family forensics for 4 years now, and every month I see the same story. A smart man spends years being the foundation, pays the mortgage, fixes what breaks, never asks for credit. And then one day the people standing on top of that foundation decide it's replaceable. They hire a lawyer, draft something aggressive, and assume the quiet man won't fight back because he never has before. Diane and I are solid." "I'm not talking about Diane, hon. I'm talking about the machine behind Diane." I didn't answer that. 7 years ago, walking to her car after that same lunch, she stopped with her hand on the driver's door. "If it ever goes sideways," she said, "you call me first." Not a general practice attorney, not a mediator, me. I know what families like the Claibornes do when they decide someone's in the way. "It won't go sideways," I said. She looked at me over the roof. "It always goes sideways. The only question is whether you're ready when it does." I told her I'd be fine. I said that a lot over the years. It was my version of mortar. Fill the gaps, let it set. For 21 years, I paid the mortgage, repointed the fireplace, rewired the breaker panel, replaced the subflooring, refinanced the colonial twice, earned engineering licenses in 3 states, and attended every Claiborne event with a bottle of wine I'd selected and a patience they mistook for compliance. Not once in all those years did anyone in that family ask what I did before engineering. Not once did they wonder why a man trained to catch liars might sit so still in a room full of people performing. The Claibornes never learned my job title, never visited my office, never asked about the maps or the pens or what the contour lines meant. They saw a man who showed up, fixed what was broken, and never complained. And they assumed that was all there was. 21 years of devotion to a family that spent every one of those years running the clock. Waiting for Diane to outgrow me, waiting for the correction Patricia had been planning since she wore navy to my wedding, waiting for me to become irrelevant. The ice machine knocked down the hall. Another truck geared down for the exit ramp. I set the cashier's check on the laminate desk and looked at it for a long time. They thought $2.8 million would make me disappear. They had no idea what furniture remembers. 18 months before the ambush, Diane started attending her mother's charity board meetings. She framed it as civic engagement. The Claiborne Foundation hosted quarterly galas for regional nonprofits, literacy programs, children's hospitals, environmental restoration. Patricia chaired the board. 3 seats had opened after a round of term expirations, and Diane filled one of them. "It's just a few events a year," she said, standing at the bathroom mirror, applying mascara with new precision. Mother asked, "It would look strange if I said no." "You said no for 20 years. People change, Wyatt." I didn't argue. She went to the first meeting in a silk blouse I'd never seen before and came home 3 hours later talking about capital campaigns and endowment structures in a voice that sounded like Patricia's press releases. Within 2 months, the quarterly events became monthly commitments. Board meetings expanded into property launches, political fundraisers, and cocktail receptions at Ridgemont Country Club, the private club the Claibornes had co-founded in 1987. Membership required a 6-figure initiation fee and 2 sponsor letters from existing members. Diane had grown up swimming in their pool. I'd never been inside. She didn't invite me. I didn't ask. The name thing started around month 3. At one of the few Claiborne dinners I still attended, Diane was telling a story about a weekend trip she'd planned, a wine tour through the Shenandoah Valley. "My husband and I went last October," she said to the woman beside her. The vineyards were gorgeous. My husband, not Wyatt. She'd used my name in conversation for 20 years. Now, I was a pronoun. I set my fork down and watched her through the rest of dinner. She told 2 more stories. Both referenced plans, weekends, home projects. In neither story did she use my name. A month later, at a holiday reception at the estate, I stood near the dining room doorway while Diane described our kitchen renovation to one of Patricia's Orchid Society friends. "We had the countertops replaced in September," she said. "The contractor did good work. I'd done the demolition myself. Pulled the old granite, shimmed the new quartz, sealed every edge on a Saturday afternoon while she was at the club. The contractor installed the sink. I wasn't in the story anymore. Not even as a pronoun. Reed Atherton's name first appeared on a Claiborne Development Group prospectus that Diane left on the kitchen counter. I picked it up while making coffee. The project was a mixed-use commercial complex on the east side, retail ground floor, professional offices above. Reed Atherton, listed as development partner, 41 years old, according to the bio, Princeton undergrad, MBA from Darden, member of Ridgemont since 2019. The headshot showed a man with even features, good teeth, and the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not job sites. Everything the Claibornes approved of. Pedigree, credentials, club membership. The opposite of a fraud investigator who'd married their daughter at a courthouse because cathedral weddings made him claustrophobic. "Who's Reed Atherton?" I asked when Diane came downstairs. She poured herself coffee without looking at me. "He's working with Dad on the Millbrook project." "Why?" "His prospectus is on the counter." "Dad probably left it last time he was here." Howard hadn't visited in 6 weeks. I knew because I'd replaced the porch light he'd commented on during his last visit, and it still had the original packaging in the recycling bin, dated. "Okay," I said. 2 weeks later, Diane mentioned Reed in passing. Something about a development timeline Howard was frustrated with. A month after that, she mentioned him again, this time with his first name only. Then his name stopped appearing in conversation. The phone habits changed first. Diane had always left her phone face up on the kitchen counter, the nightstand, wherever she set it down. Now it lived face down, or in her purse, or in the pocket of whatever she was wearing, which itself was new. Diane had never been a phone-in-pocket person. I walked into the bedroom one night, and she was typing with both thumbs, fast, the way you text someone who's waiting for your message. She looked up, and the screen went dark. "Who's that?" I asked. "Board stuff. The gala's next week." It was 11:40 on a Tuesday. Board stuff didn't generate rapid-fire texts before midnight. I said nothing, went to brush my teeth. Next came the dinners. Diane had eaten at home 5 nights a week for our entire marriage. Now she had work dinners twice a week, sometimes 3 times. The restaurants she mentioned, Castellan's, the Granary, Wren and Rye, were names I recognized from the Ridgemont event calendar that Diane had pinned to the refrigerator. She came home from these dinners smelling like a cologne I didn't own. "Good dinner?" I asked once, sitting in my office at 10:30, a half-finished contour map of the Blue Ridge Parkway on my desk. "Fine," she said from the hallway. Long. Long. A woman who scheduled her days in 15-minute increments and resented any meeting that ran over. Now her dinners lasted 4 hours, and she described them with one word. Before the board appointments, Diane's mother came to our house once a month, usually on a Saturday, usually to comment on something that needed updating. Now she appeared weekly, and the visits shifted to weekday afternoons. While I was at work, I knew because of the small changes she left behind. The first one was a topographical map. I'd drawn a section of the Appalachian Trail through Virginia. 6 hours of work. Fine-tip pen, elevation markers at 20-foot intervals. I'd framed it and hung it in the downstairs hallway, the one guests saw when they entered the house. One Tuesday I came home, and the frame was gone. I found it face down in the coat closet, behind a box of winter boots. I hung it back up. Didn't mention it. The following week, my engineering license, the original certificate, not a copy, had been moved from the living room shelf where it had sat for 8 years to the top shelf of the guest bedroom closet. Behind suitcases? "Did you move my PE certificate?" I asked Diane. Mother thought the living room looked cluttered. She helped me reorganize. She reorganized my license into a closet? "It's just a certificate, Wyatt. 6 years of night school says otherwise." And now it's in the closet. It's not a big deal. I let it go, but I started keeping a list. Dates, items moved, locations. The investigator's instinct I'd spent 20 years ignoring in my own home had switched on, and I couldn't turn it off. Over the next 3 months, the rearrangements followed a pattern. My maps came down from the hallway. My engineering awards migrated from the study to a box in the basement. A framed photo of me receiving my PE license was replaced with a Claiborne family portrait that had never hung in our house before. The changes were small enough to deny individually and devastating when you lined them up. Patricia was editing me out of my own home, room by room, wall by wall. The language changed next. Diane had always spoken in direct sentences. Yes, no, I want this, I don't want that. Clear signals. Now her vocabulary shifted into something borrowed. I think we need to restructure our priorities, she said one evening over dinner she'd barely touched. I put my fork down. Restructure our priorities. That wasn't how Diane talked. That was how Patricia talked about underperforming properties. What does that mean? I asked. It means things are transitioning. We're in different places than we were 10 years ago. Different places. How? She picked up her wine glass and studied it. I don't think this is a productive conversation right now. Productive. Transitioning. Restructuring. She was talking about our marriage in the same language the Claiborne Development Group used for strip mall acquisitions. I was a property being evaluated for sale. Then the bedroom. 8 months before the ambush, Diane told me she was pregnant. Twins. I stood in the kitchen and held her and told her I was happy, and I was for about 40 seconds, until the math didn't work. We'd been intimate twice in the previous 4 months. Both times felt obligatory, like she was checking a box. She moved to the guest room at 7 weeks. Barely into her first trimester. The mattress hurts my back, she said, carrying her pillow down the hall. Doctor's orders. I called her OB's office the next morning and asked about mattress firmness recommendations for early pregnancy. The nurse said they didn't make specific recommendations until the 3rd trimester. 7 weeks pregnant. The nausea hadn't even started yet. Her vintage compact collection disappeared on a Saturday in March. The glass cabinet she'd had custom built, the one interest that was hers rather than inherited from Patricia, sat empty when I came home from a site inspection. 42 Art Deco powder cases, some from the 1920s. She'd spent years building that collection, could identify any maker by the hinge mechanism alone. Where are the compacts? I asked. Mother offered to display them at the estate. The humidity control is better there. Our house had central air. The estate's greenhouse might have superior climate control, but the living room didn't. You moved your entire collection to your mother's house. It's temporary. She didn't look up from her phone. Nothing Diane had done in the previous year was temporary. Every change pointed in one direction. The board meetings, the dinners, the phone habits, the rearrangements, the language, the bedroom, and now the compacts. The one possession she valued for its own sake, relocated to the estate like luggage staged by the door before a trip. I sat in my office that night and opened the notebook I'd been keeping. 12 pages of dated entries, each one a small shift recorded with the same precision I'd used to track discrepancies in insurance claims. Phone behavior, schedule changes, Patricia's weekly visits. Items relocated, language patterns, the pregnancy timeline. Individually, each entry was nothing. a moved picture frame, a late dinner, a face-down phone. Anyone could explain them away. But 16 years of catching fraud had taught me one thing the Claibornes never considered. A pattern isn't made of any single lie. It's made of the space between lies, where the truth still shows through. I didn't have the full picture. Not yet. I couldn't see the settlement, the lawyer, the cashier's check, or the 4 chairs arranged in my living room like a deposition panel. I didn't know about Reed's vasectomy, or the prenatal paternity test, or paragraph 19. But I knew what it looked like when a story stopped matching its paperwork. And every page in that notebook said the same thing. Someone was building a case, not me, against me. Thursday evening. The lemon hit me before I opened the car door. Diane polished the furniture every Thursday. Had for years, but tonight the scent was thick, doubled, the way you clean a house before a showing. Not maintenance, preparation. I left my work bag in the car. The front door was unlocked. Diane locked everything. Deadbolt, chain, the full routine. An unlocked door meant someone had decided who'd be walking through it and how fast. The living room had been rearranged for the last time. Coffee table pushed forward 3 feet, positioned as a barrier between 2 zones. On the far side, 4 chairs sat in a row facing the entrance. The wing chairs from the dining room, the high-backed seat from Howard's study that had never been in our house before, and the leather chair from my office. My chair turned to face me. On my side of the coffee table, a single dining chair faced the row. The arrangement of a deposition panel. Patricia Claiborne occupied the center. Silver bob sharp as sheet metal. Slate blazer. Pearl earrings, gold cuff on her left wrist. Spine straight as a survey stake. She looked at me the way she'd looked at me for 21 years. Through me, past me, at whatever she'd decided should occupy my space. To her left sat Howard. Charcoal suit, shoulders rounded, eyes on his own hands. He was turning a gold cufflink between his thumb and forefinger. Clockwise, counterclockwise, clockwise. He didn't look up when I entered. To Patricia's right sat a woman I hadn't met. Mid-50s, platinum hair cut with architectural precision. Charcoal suit, silk blouse, no jewelry except a thin watch. She held a leather portfolio flat across her lap with both hands, the way attorneys hold documents they've committed to memory. Her face gave nothing. Not warmth, not hostility. The blankness of someone billing $900 an hour. Diane sat at the far end of the row. 8 months pregnant, arms crossed over a structured maternity dress, blonde hair in the weekly blowout. She stared straight ahead, not at me, not at her mother. Through me, the way you look past someone who's already gone. Behind Patricia's head, the stone fireplace rose. Every joint I'd repointed caught the late amber light. The bookshelves flanking it held Claiborne family photographs where my topographical maps had hung 6 months ago. My home, their staging ground. The platinum woman opened her portfolio, removed a document thick enough to have a spine, and slid it across the coffee table. No greeting, no preamble. 47 pages pushed across wood like a deed transfer at closing. I sat in the one empty chair. Patricia brought her hands together on her knees. She slid a cashier's check across the coffee table, on top of the document. $2.8 million drawn on First Regional Trust. The amber light from the front windows caught the bank watermark. "The twins aren't yours," she said. "Sign now and disappear." Her voice carried the flat cadence she used at property closings. No emotion, terms only. "Victoria Sloan," the platinum woman said. "I represent the Claiborne family in this matter. The terms are straightforward. I'd encourage you to read the full document before asking questions." I picked it up, page 1. No fault dissolution of marriage. Wyatt Dean Kerrigan and Diane Elizabeth Kerrigan, née Claiborne. I turned to page 2. The room held still. 4 people watching what they believed was a broken man absorbing the end of his wife. Patricia allowed herself a fractional adjustment of her cuff. Howard's cufflink kept turning. Victoria's pen rested against her portfolio, ready to witness a signature she expected within minutes. Diane's eyes stayed fixed on the far wall. They read my stillness as devastation. 10 years of sitting across from people who staged car accidents and filed inflated insurance claims had trained a specific reflex into my nervous system. The reflex didn't fire during arguments or emotional confrontations. It fired in rooms where someone had prepared paperwork designed to make a target sign before thinking. The room, the seating arrangement, the pre-cut cashier's check, the attorney positioned to close. I'd seen this architecture 100 times. Conference rooms instead of living rooms. Adjusters instead of mothers-in-law. Same structure. Overwhelm the target. Compress the decision window. Close before analysis begins. I read each page at the same speed. Page 4. Financial terms. Lump sum of $2.8 million, disbursed within 1 business day. No installments, no ongoing obligations. A single wire transfer designed to sever every financial thread between me and the Claiborne family in one cut. The check was already printed. The wire was already queued. They'd built the entire timeline around preventing me from making a single phone call. Page 7. Non-disclosure agreement. I slowed down. The ANDA covered any and all matters relating to the marriage, its dissolution, the parties' personal lives, business operations, financial arrangements, family relationships, and any information obtained during the course of the marital relationship. It extended to all Claiborne family members, business entities, trusts, foundations, and affiliated organizations. A standard marital ANDA covers the divorce terms and shared finances. This one covered everything. Every dinner conversation I'd overheard. Every business deal discussed at the holiday table while the furniture sat listening. Patricia wasn't buying silence about the divorce. She was buying silence about the dynasty. In fraud investigation, overreaching language was the first sign of concealment. People with nothing to hide draft narrow agreements. People burying something build walls around everything. Page 12. Non-disparagement. Binding forever, across all media. Another wall. Page 15 requires your initials at the bottom, Victoria said. Page 15. Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. I read the section, read it again. The language asked me to waive all claims to custody, visitation, and legal parentage. The twins would be listed as Reed Atherton's children on their birth certificates. Voluntary, irrevocable. My name erased from my own children's lives before they drew their first breath. $2.8 million for a marriage, a home, a silence, and the right to be somebody's father. They weren't buying a marriage. They were erasing a father. There's a 30-day review period noted on page 40. Victoria said, adjusting the portfolio on her lap. Though given the terms, the family would prefer resolution this evening. Prefer? The 30-day window existed in the document and nowhere else. The check sat on the table. The attorney sat in my living room. Everything about this evening was built to close in one session. The review period was cosmetic, legal cover. I turned to page 18, Representations and Warranties. Both parties affirming the accuracy of disclosed assets and liabilities. Standard. Page 19, subsection C. The parties affirm that no material facts have been withheld or misrepresented in connection with the agreements herein, and that all representations made in the negotiation and execution of this settlement are complete, accurate, and made in good faith. The room went on without me for a moment. Howard moved in his chair. Victoria checked her watch. Patricia sat with her hands folded, monitoring the speed of my reading the way she monitored construction timelines. None of them saw what I was looking at. Affirmation clauses. Material representation certifications. I'd built 3 federal referral cases on this exact sentence structure. A medical billing practice that signed a settlement with an insurer affirming full financial disclosure. 6 months later, we found $400,000 in unreported income. The affirmation clause turned a civil dispute into criminal fraud. A contractor who signed a resolution agreement certifying no hidden costs. Subcontractor kickbacks surfaced the following quarter. His own signature on the affirmation became the prosecution's primary exhibit. 12 auto body shops running staged collisions through a single network. Same clause in their carrier settlement. We traced $1.2 million in phantom repairs. Their signatures on the material fact certification, every last one, became the exhibits that sent the ringleaders to federal court. 3 cases, same clause structure, same outcome. The affirmation turned the signer's own document into a confession. I looked at subsection C again. No paternity test cited anywhere in 47 pages. No DNA verification referenced. No medical records attached. No clinical evidence of any kind supporting the claim that the twins were not my children. The entire premise of this settlement, that I was not the biological father, rested on Patricia Claiborne's assertion, backed by nothing on paper. If that assertion was a misrepresentation, if the twins were mine, then every person who signed this document had certified under paragraph 19 that no material facts had been withheld. They'd written the trap themselves. They were asking me to spring it. I looked up from page 47. Patricia sat with her hands folded, chin raised. The posture of a woman who'd closed 1,000 deals and never lost one. Howard's cufflink had stopped. Eyes on the floor, Victoria Sloane's pen was uncapped. Diane had moved from her chair to the far window sometime during my reading. Arms crossed, staring through the glass at the backyard. The yard where I'd planned to teach kids to throw a football. Her reflection in the dark glass was the only part of her that faced me. I looked at each of them. Patricia, Howard, Victoria. Then Diane's reflection in the window. I smiled. Not the broken expression they'd staged the evening around. Not the gratitude of a man receiving more than he deserved, or the defeat of a husband watching his family dissolve. The expression of someone who'd spent 10 years reading documents for a living and just found the sentence that changes everything. Patricia's chin dropped a fraction. Her eyes narrowed by a degree, the first uncertainty I'd seen on that face in 21 years. Diane flinched. A small contraction in her shoulders, there and gone. I picked up Victoria's pen, turned to the signature page, signed my name the way I signed contour map annotations. Steady hand, clean strokes, no hesitation. Every page that required initials. Every line that required a date. I set the pen on the table, picked up the cashier's check, folded it once, and placed it in my shirt pocket. I stood. The room had been designed for a different ending. For argument, negotiation, the slow collapse of a man discovering the price of his obsolescence. My silence broke the staging. Patricia's mouth opened, then closed. Victoria looked at Patricia. Howard looked at the floor. "We'll need confirmation of the wire by," Victoria started. I was past her, through the hallway, into the bedroom. I took a bag from the back of the closet, packed 3 days ago, the night the last entry in my notebook confirmed what the previous 11 months of entries had been pointing toward. 3 changes of clothes. Laptop, charger, the notebook. I walked back through the living room without looking at any of them. Diane had turned from the window. She watched me cross the room, but I didn't stop, and I didn't look back. The front door closed behind me. I drove south on Interstate 77 with the cashier's check in my shirt pocket and paragraph 19 running through my head like an elevation reading. Fixed. Verifiable. 40 miles later, I turned into a motor lodge with exterior corridors and an ice machine clanking through the cinder block walls. Cash for a week. Room 214, second floor, end of the hall. I set my laptop on the laminate desk, opened it, and sat in the blue wash of the screen. The shared Gmail loaded in 3 seconds. We'd created the account in 2009. Joint inbox for contractor bids, insurance claims, tax correspondence. The administrative backbone of a household I'd built and maintained for 15 years. Diane contributed when something needed filing. Neither of us had checked it in months. The inbox held 47 unread messages. Spam, mostly. Roofing promotions, HVAC discounts, a dental office reminder. Diane never canceled. I scrolled past them. 2 emails didn't belong. A scheduling confirmation from a genetics laboratory. A medical records packet from a urology practice. Both forwarded from Diane's personal address. I opened the account settings. Under forwarding rules, the configuration sat where I'd helped Diane set it up 6 years ago. Incoming messages tagged medical, legal, insurance, or home, auto-forwarded from her personal inbox to the shared account. She'd changed her passwords during the affair, locked her phone, angled her screen away, secured every visible access point across 18 months of deception. She'd never opened the settings page. The forwarding rule was still live. Every tagged email that hit Diane's personal inbox copied itself to an account sitting open on my laptop in a motel room off Interstate 77. A feed into the Claiborne operation, running since long before anyone in that family decided I needed to disappear. One settings check, and the feed would go dark. I worked fast. The fluorescent bathroom light buzzed. A truck downshifted on the exit ramp outside. I pulled the chair closer to the desk. Before I opened anything, I set up the protocol. Same procedure from 10 years of fraud cases at the carrier. Full-screen screenshot showing the email header. Sender address, recipient, Timestamp, subject line. Second screenshot, capturing the browser URL bar to confirm the account. Third, with the device clock visible in the corner. 3 layers of authentication per document. If any of this went before a judge, every screenshot would prove who received what, when, where, and through which account. The genetics laboratory email had arrived 11 days ago. Auto-forwarded the same minute it hit Diane's inbox. Subject line, appointment confirmation. Non-invasive prenatal paternity test, patient, Wyatt Kerrigan. Scheduled date, March 14th. The settlement had been presented to me on March 20th. 6 days later, I read the confirmation a second time. Not a result, a booking. Diane had scheduled a prenatal paternity test 6 days before her family sat me down in my own living room, slid a cashier's check across the coffee table, and told me the twins weren't mine. They hadn't tested. They'd planned to test. The family declared paternity as established fact, built a 47-page settlement on that declaration, had Victoria Sloan sit beside them while I signed paragraph 19, the clause affirming no material facts had been withheld. They didn't know whose children they were. They signed a legal document swearing certainty while scheduling the test that would provide it. I screenshotted the email. Header, oral bar, device clock. Printed it on the motel's business center printer at 2 in the morning. Wrote the date and my initials in the top margin with block letters. Slid it into a manila folder. The second email had arrived 3 days after the first. Diane had forwarded Reed Atherton's medical history to Victoria Sloan. Subject line, Reed's records for insurance paperwork. New policy. Routine procedure for a couple combining health insurance before a wedding. Pre-existing conditions, surgical history, the full disclosure package. The attachment was a 23-page PDF from a urology practice. Page 1. Initial consultation. Reed Atherton, age 37. Requesting vasectomy. Page 4. Operative report. Bilateral vasectomy performed under local anesthesia. Page 11. 3-month follow-up. Semen analysis. Azoospermia confirmed. 0 sperm count. Page 15. 12-month follow-up. Repeat analysis. Azoospermia confirmed. 0 motile sperm. 0 non-motile sperm. The urologist's note at the bottom, patient counseled that reversal success rates decline with time. Current status, functionally sterile. I set the laptop back on the desk and read the note again. Reed Atherton had been vasectomized years before Diane's pregnancy. 2 follow-up analyses confirmed 0 sperm count. The biology was not ambiguous. It was documented, clinical, and final. Reed could not father children. The twins could not be his. The entire premise of the Claiborne buyout, the living room ambush, the cashier's check, the 47 pages, Patricia's flat declaration, rested on a biological impossibility confirmed by the man's own medical records. Forwarded by the woman who claimed to be carrying his children. I printed every page, wrote the date and my initials on each one, added them to the folder. The third category surfaced during my second week. Victoria Sloan had sent ENDA drafts to Patricia's personal address throughout the revision process. 4 versions over 12 days, each carrying words tracked, changes markup. The forwarding rule caught versions 3 and 4 because Diane was copied on both and the legal tag auto-applied. The emails had been sitting in the inbox since before the settlement, buried between spam and contractor quotes. I hadn't reached them on that first night. I opened version 3. Boilerplate language through 15 pages. Confidentiality provisions, non-disparagement, the financial terms I recognized from the final document. Then page 16, section 12. Paternity disclaimer. The parties acknowledge that biological parentage of the minor children has not been independently verified by clinical testing, and that the representations regarding paternity contained herein are based on the stated belief of the parties, rather than confirmed medical evidence. A safeguard clause. The kind of language an attorney inserts to protect her client from misrepresentation claims. Victoria had tried to do her job. I opened version 4, section 12, was gone. Red strike-through, deleted. The document metadata showed the deletion originated from Patricia Claiborne's email client. Attached to the draft was Patricia's reply, sent 40 minutes after she'd received version 3. Victoria, remove section 12.4. We're not opening that door. The narrative is simple. The children are Reeds. Remove the disclaimer and send the final version to Diane for review. I read that email 3 times. Patricia had seen the safeguard her own attorney built into the document, the one sentence that would have protected the family from fraud liability, and ordered it destroyed. She chose the lie over the law, exposure over the single paragraph that would have shielded them all. The prenatal email proved they doubted paternity. The vasectomy records proved biological impossibility. Patricia's deletion order proved they knew and covered it up. Doubt, impossibility, suppression. 3 rungs, each one higher than the last. I spent the next 9 days building the binder. Every document received the same treatment. Full-screen screenshots with headers and metadata. Printed copies with dates and initials in block handwriting. Cross-references in the margins. Arrows linking the prenatal email's timestamp to paragraph 19. Reed's vasectomy date circled and connected to the settlement's paternity claim. Patricia's deletion instruction pinned beside the final end of version showing the missing section. Between sessions, I drew a section of the Appalachian Corridor I'd never finished, the stretch through Giles County where the trail drops 800 feet in 2 miles. The lines held still when everything else shifted. 2-inch black 3-ring binder from a drugstore on the highway. 6 tabbed dividers, settlement, wire transfers, email chain, medical records, timeline, DIA analysis, each section organized with the source document facing forward and my annotations on the page behind. The timeline tab held a single, hand-drawn sheet, a chronology spanning 18 months. Every date verified against email timestamps, bank records, and the settlement document. It looked like a contour map. Different terrain. Same principle, verifiable facts arranged in sequence, immune to spin. On a Tuesday morning in the 3rd week, I drove 40 miles south to a UPS store in a strip mall I'd never visited. The notary was a woman in her 60s who stamped without conversation. 7 key pages, notarized with witnessed signatures. The prenatal scheduling email, Reed's vasectomy confirmation, Patricia's deletion instruction, and 4 pages of tracked changes, revision history. If Diane found the forwarding rule and killed it tomorrow, the evidence existed on paper. Authenticated, witnessed, and stored where no Claiborne would think to look. Back at the motel, I set the binder on the laminate desk. 2 inches thick. tabbed, indexed, cross-referenced. 21 years of marriage reduced to exhibits. I picked up my phone and called Tricia O'Dom, my old investigation partner, now doing forensic consulting for a family law firm downtown. "I need you to look at something," I said. "Room 214, the motel off exit 42. Give me 50 minutes. She made it in 43. The knock came, and I opened the door. She walked past me, carrying her leather messenger bag, reading glasses hanging from the beaded chain around her neck. Blazer over a graphic tee. She stopped when she saw the desk. The binder was open to the timeline tab. "How long have you been here?" She scanned the room, pushed aside comforter. Empty coffee cups. Printouts stacked in labeled groups. 3 weeks. She pulled the spare chair to the desk, sat, put her glasses on. Started with the settlement tab and worked forward. I stood by the window and watched the parking lot. 20 minutes, pages turning, ice machine knocking through the wall. Twice she pulled her glasses down and held a page closer to the lamp. Once she laid documents from 2 different tabs side by side and ran her finger between the timestamps. She reached the Onda Analysis tab, read Patricia's email, set the page down, took her glasses off. "Son of a bitch." Not loud. The way you say it when a picture finishes assembling and the picture is worse than you expected. Glasses back on. She flipped past the vasectomy records. She'd already seen what they meant, and went straight back to the prenatal scheduling confirmation. Held it next to Patricia's deletion order. 2 documents, side by side. "They booked the paternity test 6 days before they handed you the settlement," she said. And Patricia's own attorney put in a disclaimer. Standard protection. And Patricia ordered it removed. 40 minutes after receiving the draft. Tricia closed the binder, both hands flat on the cover. She looked at me over her glasses, the way she used to look at me across our desks at the Carrier when a case broke open. "Wyatt, this is the cleanest evidence package I have ever seen outside of federal prosecution. It's not prosecution. Not yet. It's better." She tapped the binder with one finger. Paragraph 19. "They certified no material facts were withheld. You've got the prenatal email proving they doubted paternity, the vasectomy records proving impossibility, and the Enda revisions proving they covered it up. 3 layers. Any one of these wounds, the settlement, together they kill it." She opened her messenger bag and pulled out a legal pad. "I need to make calls." "You have copies of all this?" "Digital backups on 2 encrypted drives. Paper notarized 40 miles south." She shook her head. "You always were the best investigator in that unit. 3 weeks ago, I sat in my own living room while 4 people decided I was furniture. Now the blueprint of their operation filled a 2-inch binder on a $30 desk, and the woman across from me was writing names on a legal pad." Tricia looked up. "We're going to need a judge who reads her own exhibits." "You have someone?" she smiled. First smile I'd seen in 3 weeks. "I have someone." Tricia's corner office occupied the 7th floor of a mid-rise professional building downtown. Traffic noise seeped through the windows. 2 monitors ran forensic accounting software against the left wall. Case files covered every horizontal surface that wasn't already holding coffee cups. A vintage clue board sat under glass on the corner of her desk beside a framed photograph. The 2 of us at a Carrier holiday party, 12 years younger, holding matching Investigator of the Year plaques. The whiteboard took up the wall behind her chair. She'd been at it since 6 a.m. Timeline arrows in blue, circled dates in black, and at the center, underlined twice in red marker. Paragraph 19. Tricia walked me through the architecture of the case. Paragraph 19, subsection C. The affirmation of material facts. Combined with the prenatal scheduling email dated 6 days before the settlement. Under state contract law, that combination was provable, fraudulent misrepresentation. They'd scheduled a paternity test. They hadn't waited for results. They'd sat in my living room and signed a document swearing no material facts were withheld. That's not a gray area, Tricia said, tapping the prenatal date on the whiteboard. That's not sloppy lawyering. That's fraud. The enda was the next question. Avoidable agreement leaves the decision to a court. This was different. The onda had been built on deliberate suppression of material fact. The disclaimer was in version 3 of Victoria's draft. Patricia ordered it removed, not oversight, construction. The agreement wasn't broken after the fact. It never drew breath, Tricia said. She drew a line from Patricia's name to the deletion order timestamp. Every silencing clause in that document, the confidentiality provision, the non-disparagement, the coverage of all Claiborne entities, rested on subsection C's certification. They'd built the walls so high to keep me quiet that when the foundation proved false, everything came down with it. I opened the binder to the Wire Transfers tab. What about the money? The cashier's check had been theater, the physical prop for the living room ambush. The wire was the real mechanism. Tricia pulled a bank confirmation printout from the stack beside her monitor. It hit my account at 9:07 a.m. the morning after the ambush. The settlement included a 30-day review period on page 40. They funded the buyout 12 hours after I signed. They never planned to honor the review window. She held up a second confirmation. Same morning. $47,000 wired to Victoria Sloan's firm. You don't send legal fees the day after a settlement meeting unless those fees were negotiated before the meeting happened. This wasn't a divorce, Wyatt. This was an operation. Pre-coordinated, pre-funded, executed on the timeline they built weeks before you walked through your own front door. She wrote 47K Sloan on the whiteboard and circled it. Victoria's tracked changes drafts would go into the filing as central exhibits. Patricia's instruction to remove the paternity disclaimer. We're not opening that door. The narrative is simple. The children are Reed's, quoted verbatim in the motion, her own words, her own email client. Now part of an active court record. She pulled her glasses off and set them on the desk. Now, jurisdiction. Judge Carolyn Faith. Tricia had mentioned her at the motel, and in the days since, she'd pulled the judge's docket history, ruling patterns, and appellate record. 60 years old. 31 years on the family court bench. Known for two things: zero tolerance for fraudulent filings and reading every exhibit herself rather than relying on clerk summaries. Her rulings were overturned on appeal less than 4% of the time because her factual findings left nothing for a higher court to second-guess. Faith doesn't delegate evidence review, Tricia said. She opens the binder. She reads the timestamps. She follows the revision history line by line. And when she sees an attorney who removed a standard safeguard clause at her client's direction, she treats it like what it is: obstruction of the court's ability to evaluate the agreement's legitimacy. When do we file? Tricia walked to the whiteboard and drew a circle around a date 3 weeks out. Diane and Reed's wedding. Ridgemont Country Club. 200 guests from the Claiborne social and business networks. The DNA request goes first, she said. Filed this week, before the Claibornes know we're moving. She tapped the current date, then drew an arrow 5 days before the circled wedding date. The fraud motion lands here. Enough time for the court to process. Not enough time for the Claibornes to restructure before 200 people watch them try to hold a wedding on a lie. Every family the Claibornes had courted, over 4 decades of property deals, charity boards, and country club functions. The most public venue Patricia could have chosen for Diane's new beginning. And every one of those guests would know why the ceremony didn't happen. The filing would argue 3 things. First, the settlement was predicated on material fraud, and every silencing provision in the NDA was invalid from inception. Second, my relinquishment of parental rights was unenforceable because it rested on a provable biological impossibility. Reed Atherton could not father children. His own urology records confirmed it. I'd been asked to surrender rights to my own children based on a claim that was clinically false. Third, the $2.8 million constituted compensation for fraudulent misrepresentation, not a voluntary settlement subject to return. Compensation. They committed fraud. They paid me. The money stays, Tricia said. They paid me for a fraud they committed. And their own paragraph 19 is the receipt. The DNA request went to Judge Faith's clerk the following Monday. Court-supervised prenatal paternity testing. Both parent samples collected under judicial protocol. Results delivered under seal to prevent interference. Chain of custody witnessed at every stage. 2 days later, the forwarding rule died. I logged into the shared Gmail on a Tuesday morning, and the inbox showed nothing. Not cleared. Disconnected. The auto-forward configuration had been deleted from Diane's account settings. She'd found it. Whether she'd gone looking or stumbled into the settings during a routine password update, the result was the same. The live feed into the Claiborne operation went dark. I stared at the empty inbox for 30 seconds. Then I walked to the filing cabinet in Tricia's office, where the binder sat beside 2 encrypted backup drives and a notarized evidence packet stamped at a UPS store 40 miles south of Claiborne territory. Every email, every medical record, every tracked changes draft. Printed, annotated in block handwriting, witnessed by a notary who didn't know me and didn't care to. 2 weeks too late. The forwarding rule had run for 23 days after the ambush. In that window, every document that mattered had passed through it and into my hands. Diane could delete every digital trace, change every password, scrub every forwarding configuration in her account. The evidence existed on paper now. In a courthouse filing. In a judge's chambers. She'd locked the door after everything inside had already been carried out. The DNA request cleared Judge Faith's chambers in 4 days. Testing was ordered and conducted under judicial protocol. 2 weeks of drafting, revising, cross-referencing every exhibit against the binder. Tricia filed the fraud motion on a Thursday morning, 5 days before the wedding. The documents went to Judge Faith's clerk at 9:15 a.m. with a request for expedited review based on the pending relinquishment of parental rights. a time-sensitive custody matter involving unborn children whose legal parentage was being assigned on the basis of documented fraud. Then we waited. The morning of the wedding, I sat in Tricia's office at 6 a.m. The whiteboard was still covered in her timeline arrows and circled dates. The binder sat closed on her desk. Everything that could be filed had been filed. Everything that could be argued had been argued. One variable left. If the DNA excluded me, if the twins were not mine, then the fraud argument collapsed. The Claiborne's misrepresentation about paternity would become an accurate statement, made carelessly but not falsely. The onda would stand. The relinquishment would hold. And I would be exactly what they'd built the living room staging to produce. A man who took a check and disappeared. 2 inches of evidence. 3 weeks of work. 21 years of marriage. All of it suspended on a single biological fact sealed inside an envelope I hadn't opened. Tricia's phone rang at 6:47 a.m. She picked up, listened for 12 seconds. "We'll pick it up in 20 minutes. She hung up and looked at me. Lab courier, delivered to the clerk's office. Faith opened the seal herself. She picked up her messenger bag, already packed. Inside, a certified copy of the court filing and the sealed results envelope released by the clerk's office. "You want to come?" she asked. "No, you deliver it." She studied my face. Then she nodded, slung the bag over her shoulder, and walked out. The Claiborne estate sat on 12 acres at the end of a tree-lined private road. 7,000 square feet of Georgian revival behind a circular gravel drive with a greenhouse along the east wing where Patricia grew her competition orchids. Tricia told me what happened. She pulled into the drive at 8 a.m. A florist's van was already parked by the side entrance, its rear doors open. White orchid arrangements were being carried 2 at a time toward the back of the house. A caterer's truck idled behind it. A young woman with a clipboard directed traffic on the flagstone path leading to the garden terrace where, in 6 hours, every name on the invitation list would watch Diane marry Reed Atherton. Tricia parked behind the florist's van, walked to the front door, and rang the bell. Patricia opened it. Silver bob, silk robe, pearl earrings in place at 8 in the morning. Coffee cup in her right hand. Behind her, the foyer opened into a wide hallway with 12-foot ceilings. On the left wall hung a portrait in a gilded frame. Howard and Patricia flanking a teenage Diane. The 3 of them posed before this same house. The dynasty arranged for display. Patricia's eyes went to the messenger bag, then to Tricia's face. "Can I help you?" "Patricia Claiborne?" "Who's asking?" Tricia removed the envelope and the court filing. Held them out. Court filing in the matter of Kerrigan versus Claiborne, and the sealed DNA paternity results ordered by Judge Carolyn Faith. Patricia didn't take them. Her eyes moved between the documents and Tricia's face, running a calculation. Accept the information or force a process server to return Monday when the wedding would already be done. "What is this about?" "Open the envelope," Tricia said. Patricia set her coffee cup on the foyer table. She took the envelope with both hands. One nail caught the seal. She pulled the single page free. Clinical letterhead. Laboratory name. 2 columns of genetic markers running down the left side of the page in 12-point type. At the bottom, bold, Wyatt Kerrigan. Probability of paternity, 99.998%. Below that, stamped in red, Reed Atherton, excluded. Patricia's eyes went to the bottom of the page. went back to the top. The way Tricia described it, she read the entire sheet a second time without moving. The portrait hung behind her in the morning light, coming through the foyer's tall windows. Howard's broad shoulders, her own straight back, Diane's young smile. 45 years of construction, captured in oil and guilt. She looked up from the page. Her hands were not steady. Tricia placed the court filing on the foyer table beside the cooling coffee. She turned, walked back down the gravel drive past the florist carrying white orchids toward a ceremony that no longer had a reason to exist, past the caterer reviewing his clipboard, past the young woman with the event schedule directing preparations for a celebration built on a claim that a single sealed page had just erased. Behind her, Patricia stood in the doorway holding a piece of paper that $2.8 million could not buy back. I wasn't at Ridgemont Country Club that morning. I sat in Tricia's office 7 miles away, drawing contour lines on a section of the Blue Ridge Parkway, while the Claiborne dynasty came apart. What I'm about to describe came from 3 sources. Tricia's calls throughout the day. She'd positioned herself at the club. Court records filed the following week. And depositions taken under oath 6 weeks later, which I read line by line with the same attention I'd given every page of that 47-page settlement. Tricia's first call came at 9,005. She's at the club, went straight to the bridal suite with the envelope. The florists had been there since 6 a.m. Patricia's orchid arrangements. White phalaenopsis, 40 stems per centerpiece, sat on 20 round tables draped in ivory linen. The grand ballroom ran 120 feet along the west wing, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the man-made lake. A string quartet tuned instruments on the far side. On the flagstone terrace outside, an arch wrapped in orchids framed 200 white chairs facing the water. 200 guests from the Claiborne social network. Property developers, bank executives, charity board members, political donors, people Patricia had spent 4 decades building relationships with. Every one of them dressed and seated by 10, programs in hand, phones off. Diane was in the bridal suite on the 2nd floor. Mirror-lined walls reflected a woman in structured ivory silk. Hair up, makeup finished. She stood at the window overlooking the terrace when Patricia walked in, still in the silk robe and pearl earrings from the estate. She hadn't changed, hadn't had time. Patricia held the DNA results in one hand and the court filing in the other. Her hand shook. Tricia saw it at the estate doorway, and Diane confirmed it under oath 6 weeks later. The woman who never raised her voice, who built a real estate empire on pure will. Her hands shook, and they didn't stop. "We have a problem," Patricia said. Diane took the DNA results. Read them standing in her wedding dress, with the terrace below. The orchid arch, the chairs, the lake-catching morning light. Wyatt Kerrigan, probability of paternity, 99.998%. Reed Atherton, excluded. The children she told me weren't mine. The children she told Reed were his. Both claims collapsed by a single laboratory page. "This can't be right," Diane said. "It's court-ordered." The judge sealed it herself. Diane sat on the chaise. Her reflection stared back from 3 mirrored walls. The same woman multiplied, the same wedding dress, the same result sitting beside her makeup brushes. She didn't speak for what her deposition described as several minutes. Patricia made calls. Howard, Victoria Sloan. Reed, all summoned to a private room off the ballroom, wood-paneled, built for wedding party preparation. Within 30 minutes, the family had assembled behind a closed door. Through the paneling, the string quartet's Vivaldi carried from the ballroom where 200 guests sat waiting. Reed Atherton stood near the window in his wedding suit. 41. Jacket unbuttoned, hands in his pockets, standing the way men stand when they've never had a document turn against them. He'd arrived expecting to get married in 2 hours. Victoria Sloan sat at the table and read the court filing page by page. Her face changed on page 6. That was where her own tracked changes and drafts appeared as exhibits. Version 3, containing her standard paternity disclaimer, Section 12, reproduced in full. Version 4, with the section deleted. And Patricia's email instructing Victoria to remove the disclaimer, quoted verbatim as Exhibit D. Her own client's written instruction. Now evidence in a fraud motion filed with the court. "We cannot proceed with this ceremony," Victoria said. "We are not canceling this wedding," Patricia said. 200 people are sitting in that ballroom. Patricia. Victoria's voice was different now. Not the $900 an hour composure. Self-preservation. Reed is provably not the biological father. Those results are court-ordered and sealed by Judge Faith. If you walk your daughter down that aisle to marry a man who cannot be the father of those children, every person in this room faces obstruction charges on top of the fraud motion. We can contest the results. With what? His vasectomy records are in the filing. 4 years post-procedure. 2 follow-up analyses. 0 sperm count. The biology is not in question. There must be. The option was the disclaimer I drafted in version 3. The one you told me to remove. The room held. Victoria turned to Reed. Your medical records, the consultation, the procedure, the follow-up analyses, are exhibits in this filing. This is a public court document now. His hands came out of his pockets. How are my medical records in a court filing? Diane forwarded your history to my office for insurance purposes. Those emails are now exhibits. Reed turned to Diane. You told me the twins were mine. I believed they were, Diane said. You scheduled a paternity test, Victoria said. 6 days before the settlement. You don't schedule a test when you're certain. Were you certain? Reed asked. Diane didn't answer. Howard sat in a chair against the far wall, head in his hands. The broad-shouldered man who'd spent 20 years following Patricia's lead, calling me Wayne, adjusting his cufflinks, staring at the floor while his wife arranged the living room ambush. Now seeing the full cost of where that silence led. He said nothing during the entire meeting. His deposition, taken 6 weeks later, ran 11 pages. Most answers were 3 words or fewer. Victoria stood. She placed the filing in her portfolio and addressed the room for the last time as their attorney. I'm withdrawing as counsel. As of this moment, I advise each of you to retain independent representation before responding to this filing. Do not contact Wyatt Kerrigan or his legal team. Do not discuss these documents with anyone outside this room. She walked out. Patricia turned to Howard. Call our litigation attorney. We need new counsel before noon. Howard didn't lift his head. Tricia called me at 10,002. Victoria just walked out of the private room. portfolio under her arm, didn't look back. She withdrew. In front of all of them. I've never seen a lawyer drop a client that fast. The rest came from court records. Judge Faith had moved the case to her accelerated docket after the DNA results confirmed the fraud claim. A preliminary order froze the parental relinquishment clause, the page where I'd signed away fatherhood. My signature sat on that page, but the court had suspended its effect before the ink was 6 weeks old. Faith reviewed the evidence binder herself. Every tab, every notarized document, every time-stamped screenshot with my block letter annotations. She read every page. That was her reputation and her method. Her ruling was 4 pages. The settlement was predicated on material fraud. Paragraph 19's affirmation, the clause certifying no material facts had been withheld, was signed by individuals who had scheduled a paternity test before the settlement, possessed medical records proving the named father's biological impossibility, and removed a standard legal disclaimer designed to disclose that uncertainty. The misrepresentation was not accidental. It was built. The ANDA was void. Not voidable. Void. Every silencing provision, every non-disparagement clause, every confidentiality restriction covering Claiborne entities and trusts and foundations. Built on a false certification, erased by a true one, the parental relinquishment was unenforceable. I had signed away rights to children I was told were not mine, based on a claim the family knew was unverified, and that the biology proved impossible. My parental rights were not restored. They were retroactively affirmed. The court's position was that they had never been validly surrendered. The $2.8 million stayed. Not a settlement payment subject to return, compensation. The Claiborne family committed fraud. They paid me $2.8 million in the commission of that fraud. The money was mine. Their own paragraph 19 was the receipt. Victoria Sloan faced a state bar investigation for professional liability. An attorney who removes a standard safeguard clause at her client's written instruction, then presents the resulting document as a good faith agreement, has a problem no billable rate resolves. The private room emptied. At Ridgemont, the wedding was canceled before the ceremony's scheduled start. 200 guests. The developers, the executives, the board members, the donors who'd written checks to Claiborne causes for decades. They filed out of the ballroom in clusters, programs still in hand, phones already out, asking each other what happened, piecing the story together from hallway fragments and murmured exchanges between staff who'd watched Victoria walk out with her portfolio and not return. The phones carried the rest. Text messages, group chats, calls from the parking lot. By noon, the story had reached every member family at Ridgemont. By evening, it had traveled through the business networks, contractors, bankers, planning commission contacts, donors who'd attended Claiborne events for years. By morning, it sat on breakfast tables across 3 counties. The family that built its power on reputation had chosen the most public venue in their social world for a ceremony built on a lie. 200 witnesses carried the wreckage home. At cocktail hours and tennis courts and board meetings and dinner tables, the name Claiborne, which for 45 years had opened doors, secured loans, and meant everything in 3 counties, now meant something else. Tricia's last call came at 4 that afternoon. "It's over," she said. Caterers packed up. Florists left the Orchids. Nobody authorized payment. String quartet's been gone since noon. Staff is stacking chairs. And Patricia, still there, alone in the ballroom. I sat with the phone against my ear and the contour map half finished on Tricia's desk. 7% grade, 1,200 feet above sea level. 40 miles away, Patricia Claiborne stood in the empty ballroom at Ridgemont Country Club. Chairs stacked against the far wall. Table settings half dismantled. Ivory linens folded on service carts. Her orchid arrangements, white phalaenopsis, 40 stems per centerpiece, grown in her greenhouse with the patience she never gave to people. Wilting under afternoon light on tables no one would sit at. The woman who wore navy to my wedding, who called me labor adjacent, who told a room I tinkered, who rearranged my maps and shelved my licenses and edited me out of my own home, wall by wall, who sat in the center of 4 chairs in my living room and said, "Sign now and disappear." Standing in a room built for 200 people, every chair stacked, every orchid dying, and somewhere across 3 counties, 200 dinner conversations were just getting started. Before we go further, please like and tell me, 1 to 10, how's my revenge so far? 6 months later, late afternoon light came through the office window at an angle that turned the cork boards gold. My topographical maps lined every wall, the Shenandoah section I'd drawn during year 12, the Appalachian corridor through Giles County I'd started at the motel and finished at Tricia's desk, and 14 others I'd rehung in the same positions they'd occupied before someone decided they belonged in a closet. The shallow drawers sat in their cabinet beside the drafting table. Fine tip pens organized by nib width, K, 0 through 0.8, each in its slot. The architect's lamps cast warm circles on the paper beneath my hands. Through the open office door, I could see the living room mantel. My engineering license sat where it had sat for 8 years before it migrated to a guest bedroom closet behind suitcases. The PE certificates from 3 states flanked it. The stone fireplace held every joint I'd repointed. Same mortar, same match to the 1940s formula. Nobody had rearranged anything in 6 months. Nobody would. The house smelled like paper and ink, not lemon polish. I was drawing a section of the Blue Ridge Parkway, the stretch near Craggy Gardens where the trail climbs through rhododendron tunnels before opening onto a bald with views in every direction. 7% grade at the southern approach, 5,700 feet at the summit. I worked the contour lines in 20-foot intervals, the pen moving in patient arcs. This map was different from the others. I wasn't drawing a trail I'd walked. I was drawing one I planned to walk with 2 people who were 7 months old and had just learned to sit up on their own. The twins were born in April, healthy, 7 pounds each, which the nurses said was good for twins. Custody was finalized 6 weeks after the delivery. Primary parent. Full rights retroactively affirmed. The court's language, meaning the relinquishment I'd signed in my own living room, had never carried legal weight. The page existed. My signature sat on it. But the law treated it as though the pen never touched paper. I visited Tricia's office last week. The whiteboard was clean. No timeline arrows, no circled dates. The clue board still sat under glass on the corner of her desk. Beside it, in a new frame, hung a single page. Paragraph 19, subsection C. The parties affirm that no material facts have been withheld or misrepresented. She'd mounted it the way some attorneys mount their biggest verdict. Not for clients, for herself. "Best case I ever worked," she said, adjusting the frame a quarter inch. "And I worked it with the best investigator I know. You framed a subsection of avoided enda. I framed the sentence that won." She pushed her glasses up. "Let me have this." I let her have it. Back in my office, I set the pen down and studied the map. The contour lines ran clean. Elevation markers at regular intervals. The summit bold, drawn with the care of someone who had time. No urgency, no ice machine knocking through the wall, no fluorescent light buzzing for company. A 7% grade is a 7% grade. The mountain doesn't care who's climbing it. It doesn't renegotiate. Some canyons can't be erased with a checkbook. They can only be walked through. I picked up the pen and drew the next line.